into today's class. For today, I do have a set of blocks with me. We're not going to be using them the entire time, but there are some transitions that you may find them helpful to have nearby. So whenever you have your space and what you need, let's go ahead and meet in Tadasana at the back of your mat. And when coming into your space, start by bringing the feet a comfortable distance apart. So if you would like them to be a little bit wider, you're more than able to enter that space. If you'd like a more narrow stance, just find whatever comes naturally, whatever feels supportive. As you start to bring the attention into that connection between the soles of the feet and the earth below you, feel free to shift your weight side to side, forward and back, just exploring your space in this capacity. Those movements, they can be big, they can be small and subtle. But once you feel like you've more or less established that connection, started to feel a little bit more rooted down into your space, start to find a little bit of softness and stillness. As you use that grounding sensation to find a nice lightness, a nice lift from the ground up. And in this stillness, if you'd like to close your eyes or soften your gaze, feel free. And then allowing the arms to rest alongside your body. Maybe the palms are facing forward. Shoulders are draped down and away from your ears. And just arriving into your space here in this moment. Coming into your breath. And maybe setting an intention or taking a moment of gratitude. Take these few moments for you to arrive into your body, into your mind, into your space, into the energy that arrives with you today. Nice and slow, start to blink the eyes open. Keep that grounding sensation within the lower body. So we're lifting up through the inner arches of the feet. Finding a nice subtle strength, a nice engagement within the lower body, a nice lift within the belly. Inhale, lift those arms up and overhead. Reach those fingertips up towards the sky. Maybe gaze up if you'd like. And then on the exhale, hands are going to come through heart center. You're going to find a fold, a hinge at the hips, soft bend in the knees as the upper body, the torso comes down toward the earth. Staying strong in that lower body, feeling the length that you're creating within the back line of the legs. Feel the hips lifting up toward the sky. Keeping that lift of the hips, inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, find your fold. On the inhale, deepen the bend in the knees, ravel up. Finishing that inhale with the arms coming up and overhead, reach those fingertips tall, maybe finding a little bit more into that front body opening. And then on the exhale, hinge the hips, find that fold once more. Staying grounded within the feet, staying lifted within the hips. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, fold. Inhale, root to rise. Come all the way up. Arms come up overhead. Feel free to make that front body opener a little bit bigger. Exhale one more time. Find that fold. Feel the lengthening within the back line of the body as the fingertips come down toward the earth. Finishing that fold on the exhale. Inhale, find that halfway lift. Keeping those hips lifted. Exhale, fold. Inhale, bend the knees, open up all the way to the top as you reach those fingertips up toward the sky. And then exhale, hands come through heart center. On these next few rounds, we're going to end up in a small little crouched, closed shape toward the mat. So if you'd like to adjust your stance, you're more than welcome, and you can kind of feel that out as we move through the rounds. So I'm going to bring my feet a little bit closer together. And on that inhale, I'm going to bring those arms up and overhead once more. Exhale, finding another fold. Keeping those hips lifted, that tailbone lifted up and toward the sky. Find that exhale, that fold. And then on the inhale, you're going to drop the hips, bend the knees, find a nice little contained little egg shape here on the floor. And here is where you can bring the blocks if you'd like. If that feels so, that's a really small little narrow space you're moving into. If when you bring your hips down, you bend your knees, if you need a little bit of contact out in front of you, more than welcome to use your blocks. And then from here, you're going to press through the soles of the feet, lift those hips back up. Once the hips lift up toward the sky, you're going to ravel the spine back to standing. Using the strength of your legs to bring you, to guide you there. Inhale, arms up overhead. 2 more rounds. Exhale, find that fold, moving into that space first. Use your blocks as you need. And then drop the hips, bend the knees. Find that little egg shape. Use the blocks for support to counterbalance, trying to keep that weight shifted throughout the entirety of the foot. So you're finding that balance. Exhale. Lift those hips up. Lengthen the lower body, and then inhale all the way up to standing. Arms up overhead. And then exhale. Last round. Find that hinge, find that fold, nice and slow. Feel the length. Keep those hips lifted. Enjoy the fold for just a moment. And then bend the knees, sit the hips low, gaze forward. Use those blocks. Because on the next few rounds, we're going to work into the folding series here, or a variation of. So use the blocks. You can have them out in front of you to kind of help catch your weight as you shift onto the toes, wherever feels good for you in your body, because that's where we're moving next. So the blocks are out in front of you in some capacity. You're shifting your chest forward, your weight forward into those big toes, dropping the knees down so they're parallel with the hips. Bring those blocks wide enough so that you have room for your lower body. You're going to drop the knees down as evenly as able, and then you're going to scoop the tailbone underneath you, press those hips out and forward as you open up the front body. Feel free to sweep those arms up and overhead as you come up to the top here. And then on the exhale, sit the hips back down toward the heels. Coming back into toes pose. Pause here. Feel the stretch within the soles of the feet. Incorporating all 10 toes underneath you. And then using the blocks once more to help pluck those knees up and off the mat, coming into a lifted toes pose. Balance here. And then we're going to drop the heels. Adjust the blocks as you need to help guide you there. And then we're going to come on out of it. Shift back onto the toes. Adjust the blocks. Nice and slow, drop the knees. Inhale, press and scoop those hips forward. Open up the front body. Let it feel good. As you sweep those arms up and overhead, it can be a back bend, or you can come to a tall kneeling position. And then on the exhale, hips go back down toward the heels. Use the blocks, pluck those knees up. Pause. Exhale, drop those heels down toward the floor. Adjust with the blocks. Nice little crouched position. Feeling nice and long within the low back. Blocks out in front to help guide back up into toe stand. Drop the knees. Nice and slow, scoop the tailbone underneath you. Feel how that lengthens the muscles in the front of the thighs. Keep scooping, 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 pressing the front of the hips forward. Feel that nice little back bend, and then inhale, arms straight up overhead. Exhale, sit the hips back toward the heels. As you sit the hips toward the heels, we're going to spend just another moment or so hanging out here, feeling the length within the soles of the feet. Really trying to press that big toe mound down into the earth, almost like you're trying to flick sand back behind you. Just feeling a little bit of an energetic activation there in that space. Nice tall spine, hips stacked on top of heels. And then go ahead, come forward, bring the blocks out in front of you and off to the side. Tap the tops of the feet if that feels good, if that felt like a lot. And then from here, go ahead and inhale, extend that right leg back behind you. Keep those hips aiming down toward the mat, and then drop the big toe down towards the floor and just start to rock in and out of that right foot, working through the back line of that leg, working through the calf, the sole of the foot. Linger where you need. Then come back into that tabletop position, so equal weight in both hands, drawing down through the top of that left shin and that foot. Inhale, lift that right leg up toward the sky. Find that stability. And then you're going to turn that hip open, so those toes are going to start to face toward the right side of the room, and then you're going to kick the toes toward the top of the mat, trying to stay nice and stable everywhere else in the body. And then once that foot comes even with the hip, you're going to drop that right foot down. Feel free to tuck the left toes, maybe open up that knee a little bit, and you're going to shift the weight back and toward your hips, toward that left heel. So you're going to come in and out of this space, now working through the inner lining of that right leg. Staying grounded through the entirety of that right foot. Playing with the tilt of the pelvis, whether that low back stays rounded or whether you flick that tailbone up toward the sky. If you flick that tailbone up toward the sky and guide those hips straight back behind you, you'll feel a little bit more into the inner lining of that right leg. Pause where it feels good for a nice breath or two. Keeping that gaze just beyond the fingertips, so you're still keeping a nice long spine, even though we're focusing on the lower body right now. Then come out of it just enough to come back into that tabletop position. Hopefully you kept your blocks nearby. Grab hold of one of them if you'd like. And then we're going to come up into gay pose, so torso comes upright, and then we're going to tilt over toward the left side. So the legs stay the same, you're just coming upright, and then the left hand's going to come over toward the left side, the right arm is coming up and overhead. And that block can be even with your body. If you want to find a little bit more opening within the front of the body, bring it back behind you, maybe toward the left foot versus the left knee, and then really sweep that right arm up and back behind you and really press those hips forward. Come on back. You can bring that block back to the top of the mat. Hands come underneath you. Bring that left knee in just a pinch if you had brought it a little bit further out. And then from here, equal strength in all three corners that you have here to support you. Tuck left toes tucked or untucked. Lift that right leg up straight toward the sky. And then reverse that movement. Bring that right leg back behind you as the toes point down toward the floor. Right knee comes in to meet the left. Switching sides. Left leg. Inhale. Reach it straight back behind you. Find that bird dog-like position here, nice and stable and supportive. And then go ahead and drop those big toes down, or that big toe down, and start to work into the back of that calf, the sole of the foot, as you rock your weight forward and back. And it can just be a nice and easy weight shift forward and back. You can linger if that's what's calling to you. And then after the next round or so, we're coming back over top of the hands, back into that right shin. Inhale, lift the left leg up and back behind you. And then you're going to start to spin the left toes toward the left side of the room, trying to stay nice and stable everywhere else. And then kick those toes forward until the foot comes even with that left hip. And then you're going to drop the foot down. Ground down through the sole of the foot. And then tuck those back toes, shift your weight forward and back. Once more as we work now through the inner lining of that left leg. And if that movement, that weight shift feels good, continue on with that. If you'd like to just kind of hang out and linger in a certain space, feel free. The opportunity to play with the tilt of the pelvis. You can keep a nice neutral pelvis if that feels better. If you want a little bit more, a deeper intensity, feel free to kind of lift that tailbone up and away from the earth a little bit. So up and back in space as you reach those sit bones equally back behind you. Just gliding forward and back, keeping that lift. Coming back into that tabletop position, so bringing the weight, the shoulders back over top the wrists. Go ahead and grab one of those blocks if you'd like. You don't need to. You're going to prop yourself up so that the shoulders stack on top of the hips. Block can be right to the side or it can be a little bit behind you. As you inhale, reach that left arm up and overhead. Open through the front of that left hip, the left side body. Play with the height of the block that feels good for you. And maybe just going straight to the side, maybe even just opening through the left side body is all that you really need right here in this moment. Adjust, be where you need to be. And then come on back down, or back up nice and slow. Leave that block out into the top of the mat. Go ahead and plant the hands back down, scooch that right knee back in. And then you're going to reverse the movement so that the outer blade of that left foot is going to lift up toward the sky. Stay stable everywhere else, and then slowly start to bring the left leg back behind you as the toes aim down toward the floor. Left knee meets the right. Tabletop position. Feel free to bump the hips left to right. Maybe shift your weight forward and back. And kind of transition this into kind of a wrist warm-up, more of an exploratory opportunity to kind of just work through the hips, the shoulders, the wrists, the spine, wherever you need to take advantage of these few breaths before we transition. To kind of work through whatever kinks are kind of showing up here in class today. And then feel free to take another breath or so to move through that space. And then we're all going to meet in downward facing dog. And as we move into this space, working through the back line of the legs here. And so with that, I want you to start by working from the ground up. So with that, usually if we're kind of just pedaling the feet, the focus is typically on the muscles, the calves, the hamstrings, the back of the hips. I challenge you to focus on the ankle joint itself. And by that, when you shift your weight into that left leg, you ground down through that left heel. Typically, the focus is okay. Let's stretch through that calf. What I want you to try to guide your mind to is how deep of a bend can you find within the front of that left ankle. That may mean softening the knee to really explore that space. But start there. Trying to drop that heel as close to the earth as you can, and then trying to bring that shin bone as close to the top of the foot as you can. May take a little bit more concentration that you're used to, but see what shows up. And then once you work your way from that space, then start to straighten through the back of the knee. Find a little bit more of a lift through the hips. Feel a little bit more of a lift through the hips, a lift through the spine. More strength, more energy coming from the upper body as you press through the heels of the hands. As you stay strong within the shoulders, within the shoulder blades. Find your center. On your next inhale, right leg lifts up high towards the sky. Exhale, drive that right knee toward the right elbow. Plant the foot outside the hand. Come into a low runner's lunge. And as you come into this space, since we already have blocks nearby, likely, feel free to grab hold of those. Find a little bit more of a lift within the upper body as those hips slowly draw down toward the earth. Draw down to the earth, draw down to the earth, draw down to the earth until that left knee touches onto your mat. And as the left knee lowers, untuck the back toes. Find a nice lift within the low belly. And as you lift through the low belly, you're feeling a nice lift within the left hip point. A nice rise through the chest. And really just sink those hips low. So as long as you're keeping lifted within the low belly, you're keeping some degree of integrity within the low back, feel free to just kind of let those hips hammock down toward the center of the mat. Exhale, slowly press through the blocks as you start to straighten-ish through that right leg. Sit those hips back. Hands can stay inside that right foot, or you can bring the blocks outside the hands, the blocks outside the right leg. So you're still drawing that right hip back. You're keeping those toes toward the sky. You're keeping your spine nice and long. So you're still trying to create as much space within that right waist as you're able. Slowly bring the blocks toward the inside of that right foot if you transitioned, and then come back into that right foot. Tuck those back toes, drop those hips even further. And then from here, maybe find a little bit of opening within the front right hip by guiding that right knee out, rolling onto the outer blade of that right foot. Keeping that left hip stationary, right knee, right hip is the only moving part, the only opening that we're trying to create here, trying to further. Go ahead and drop the sole of that right foot back down. Reach that right arm straight out in front of you, and then big sweep of the arm back behind you. And make it slow and dramatic so that as you open the chest towards the right side of the room, you feel the opening within the left hip. You feel that opening, you feel that opening, you feel that reach through the right fingertips. And then maybe continue the depth here, if you like, by drawing the left heel in towards your bottom. Again, the focus is on opening through the front of that left hip. So wherever you need to be to explore comfortable depth, be there. Let go of that left foot. Right arm comes back forward onto the block. And then you can keep the blocks if you like. If you want to use them in downward facing dog, you're more than welcome. But you're going to tuck the back toes, lift the back knee, send the right foot back to meet the left, high plank. Exhale, downward facing dog. Settle into the front of those hips. Let them soften. Working our way onto the other side. Inhale, left leg lifts up high towards the sky. Exhale. Left foot comes outside, the left hand. Soft landing. And then, again, keeping that integrity within your shape, slowly drop those hips down toward the floor. Let that opening feel really nice. Keeping the back knee lifted to start, drawing that right heel back behind you. As the right heel goes back, the left knee is almost tracking forward a little bit. So you're feeling that length happening from the center and reaching out and away. Slowly drop that right knee down towards the mat. Continuing to let those hips sink heavy, but again, staying lifted within the low belly to support the low back here in this space. Adjust the blocks as you need to maintain the height within the spine. Really settling into those hips here. Trying not to clench your way out of it. So again, if you feel like you're trying to lift away from the depth, get that support a little bit higher. You want to be able to comfortably ease your way into deeper space. And that's why the blocks are super helpful here in any class, even if they're not mentioned at the start. And then slowly press through those blocks, through the left heel, to send those hips back in space, to come out of that front hip for just a moment. Those left toes come up toward the sky. Those hips reach back behind you. And the hands can stay right where they are. Or you can go ahead and bring them outside that left leg. And we're still trying to create that space or maintain that space within the left hip crease. So we're still drawing that left hip back in space. Those toes are still facing toward the sky. And we're still staying long within the waist, within the side bodies, within the torso. Play with your shape here. So if you're moving the hands outside the left leg, maybe it's nice to kind of rotate that hip open. Maybe that feels good. Keep the lift. And then nice and slow, come back into that left foot. If you move, to bring those hands back in front, back inside that left knee. And then slowly draw those hips down a little bit more. Back toes can be tucked. Lifted within the belly. And then go ahead nice and slow, reach that left arm out in front of you. Keeping the nice length within the spine. Draw a big arch around your shape. And as that left arm reaches up toward the sky, as you start to open towards the left side of the room, feel that opening within the right hip. Keep that reach to help maximize your space that you're creating here. Even if you don't decide to grab onto that right ankle, you're still feeling that energetic reach through the left fingertips. Adjust your block as you need for support. And then from here, feel free to kick the right heel toward your bottom. Feel free to make that connection happen. Still letting those hips kind of gravitate toward the earth. Slowly drop those right toes back down. Left hand comes back to meet the right. We're going to find downward facing dog. So press through the heels of the hands, lift that back knee. Left foot comes back to meet the right, high plank. Exhale, downward facing dog, soften the front of those hips. Settle into your shape. And you can use blocks or no blocks this next round. Inhale, right leg lifts up high towards the sky. Exhale, right foot outside the right hand. Plant it nice and easy. Drop that back knee right away. Still guiding those hips close down toward the earth. Lifted in the low belly. Inhale, reach those arms up and overhead. Still reaching through the fingertips to find that nice lift. And then on the exhale, keep those left fingertips reaching up towards the sky as you reach the right fingertips back behind you. They might catch the earth. They might catch the calf. They might catch the heel if you have that much space. But wherever, or you can bring a block along on your journey. You can always inhale the block up and overhead. Then keeping the left arm up, you can reach the block in that right hand. You can reach it back behind you. Just keeping that lift. If you need to come out of the space a little bit, feel free. Inhale, come back up. Blocks between the feet. Lift the back knee. Exhale, send those hips back in space. Right toes lift up toward the sky. Modified pyramid pose. That left heel drops heavy. That right hip draws back. Those toes are toward the sky. You're feeling length through both sides. Drop the right foot. Come into that lunge. Drop the back knee. Reach that right arm forward. Big sweep up and overhead. Feel that length. Feel the opening within the left hip. Stay here. Find that energetic space. Or if you want that connection, left heel toward the bottom. Slowly release. Right hand comes back down toward the block. Lift the back knee. Right foot comes back to meet the left. Exhale, downward facing dog. Soften those hips. One more round on the other side. Inhale, left leg lifts. Exhale, bend the knee. Drive it forward. Soft plant outside the left hand. Nice and slow, those hips drop down toward the earth. Let those hips sink heavy. And as that knee comes down, again, you can keep the blocks down. If you don't need them, leave them. If you'd like to bring one with you, feel free. Inhale, arms up overhead. Keep that left knee hugging in. Stay lifted within the belly. So it's like that happy balance between sinking in the hips, but still keeping the support system there. And then from here, keep those right fingertips up, lifting up toward the sky, and then draw the left arm down as it reaches on a diagonal back behind you. And again, it may just catch the space on the mat. If you want to block there, feel free to grab it. Or it might grab the calf or the lower leg, whatever feels good. Feel that reach. Feel the opening within the front of that hip. And breathe. Here for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Integrity within your space. Reach those right fingertips to help guide you there. Hands come down toward the blocks. Lift the back knee. Send the hips back in space as the left toes lift up toward the sky, coming into your modified pyramid pose. Pulling that left hip back in space, lifting through those toes, really feeling that length as the right heel tries to draw heavy down toward the earth. Come back into that left foot. Bend the knee. Press through the hands. Left foot meets the right. Downward facing dog. Soften those hip flexors. Soften the front of the legs. Nice and slow. Roll over the toes. Drop the knees. And then you're going to bring the knees together to touch. Ankles or feet out wide, and then sit the hips between the feet. And now we're going to come into hero's pose. And so if this position is too much for your knees in any way, even getting into this position if that's too much, modification, bring the shins parallel to one another, sit up on a block, fingertips back behind you, and either just stay here to open the hips. If you want a little bit more opening, you press those hips forward. You come into more of a modified kind of camel situation. It's more of just opening up the front of the hips. You don't have to go into the full expression of camel. So variations and modifications available, feel free to take them. Do not force your body into a position that is not comfortable for your body. But if we're coming into hero's pose, let those hips settle between the ankles. And if you are able to stay here, maybe the full expression is still too much. So we're just going to progress one step at a time. So nice and slow, start to lean the body back, reach the fingertips back behind you. Maybe drop the forearms down, elbows come down toward the earth. Scooping that tailbone underneath you, reset. This might be everything you need. This might be great. Stay here. If you want to go into the full expression of this hip opener, tuck those elbows underneath you, come down onto the upper arms. Bring the back of the skull down toward the earth. And just feel the nice front body opening. Grab opposite elbows up and overhead. And just find your breath. If you need to regress in any way, move into the space that feels best for you. Breath is nice and slow and steady. If it feels irregular, if it feels jagged, your body is meeting resistance it's not comfortable with. So, modify. Support yourself in a way that your body is calling for in this moment. 3 more breaths. Nice and slow. Wherever you moved into, just slowly reverse your shape. We're going to make our way back into Virasana, Vajrasana. Just as a quick passing by, as we slowly make our way onto our seat. Feet come out in front of us, grab hold of the back of the thighs and slowly lower down. Two options here. You can either move right into Shavasana if you want to just find some subtle lengthening and space in that capacity, or if you'd like to take a soft plow pose, you can always move into that space. Reaching the legs up toward the sky, up and overhead. As you reach those toes, back into the space behind you. Finding nice length within the back of the spine, within the back line of the legs. Move into a space that feels like it allows for a nice little reset, for a nice little closing of today's practice. Within the next breath or so, everyone go ahead and meet in Shavasana for your final rest. And as you come into your final pose here in today's class, feel free to wiggle out the legs, even wiggle out the arms. Feel a nice reach of the heels out and away from you. Wherever your arms are, whether alongside your body, maybe you reach them up and overhead for a moment. Wherever you choose to have them, you're reaching through those fingertips. You're really spreading everything nice and wide, reaching and stretching, opening the body before finally settling into your space. Letting the toes roll open as you open through the front of the hips. Shimmy the hips a little bit as you need to kind of scooch away any soft tissue so you can truly settle. Tucking the shoulder blades underneath you. Allowing the palms to face toward the sky. And if you haven't already, softening your gaze, closing your eyes, and coming back to your breath. Maybe you take a moment to revisit the intention that you had set. Coming back to whatever statement of gratitude you had repeated to yourself at the start of today's class. Maybe you come back to that. Just taking a moment to thank yourself for coming onto your mat, for showing up for you and your body, for your mind today. And in this space is where I'll leave you. So as always, I appreciate y'all for being here, for practicing with me, for liking and subscribing to these videos and to my channel. And every week, a new class will come out in some capacity. So I appreciate y'all for sticking with it and for following along with me. I hope y'all have an awesome rest of your day.